Take this $75,000. Dump the old plow horse, and marry the show pony. A smart man knows which one to bet on. I heard my father say those words to my fiancé, Cameron. He was not just insulting me. He was paying my boyfriend to leave me for my cousin, Celine. I did not kick the door down. I did not scream. I simply slid my phone under the gap in the door and pressed record. My name is Vanessa. I am 29 years old, and for the last 10 years, I have been the unseen spine of my father's company. I balanced the books when the accounts were bleeding red. I negotiated with suppliers when we could not pay the bills. I sold my own car, a paid-off sedan, for $4,000 just to cover payroll one grim December. But to Gregory, I was never the savior. I was the jinx. This belief started when I was 7 years old. It was a Tuesday evening in 1998. My father was hosting a potential investor in our living room, a man who was supposed to sign a contract that would change our lives. I was sitting on the carpet, coloring, listening to them talk numbers. I looked at the paper on the coffee table. I saw a discrepancy. The number written in words said 100,000, but the number in digits said 10,000. Innocently, I pointed it out. I asked, "Daddy, why are the numbers different?" The investor stopped. He looked at the paper. He looked at my father. The trust in the room evaporated instantly. He did not sign the deal. He left, and he never came back. A rational father would have blamed his own carelessness. A rational father would have thanked me for catching an error before it became a lawsuit. Gregory was not a rational father. He looked at me with a coldness that froze my blood. He told me I had a bad mouth. He said I brought bad luck into his house. From that day on, every time I spoke a hard truth, every time I pointed out a risk, he called it a curse. My intelligence became my sin. If I warned him about a bad investment, and it failed, he did not credit my foresight. He blamed my skepticism for manifesting the failure. Contrast this with Celine. My cousin Celine came to live near us when she was 12. She was not good at math. She did not care about business, but she knew how to smile and nod. She knew how to tell Gregory he was a genius even when he was driving the company into a ditch. To him, she was a charm. She was the golden niece who brought light into the room, while I was the dark cloud raining on his parade. He spent money on her like water. He paid for her modeling classes, her wardrobe, her vacations, claiming it was an investment in the family image. Meanwhile, I worked as his chief financial officer without a salary for 3 years. I lived in a studio apartment the size of a closet so that the company could afford to lease a luxury car for Celine to drive to client meetings she never actually attended. I accepted it because I thought if I worked hard enough, if I fixed enough problems, eventually he would see me. I thought loyalty was a currency that accumulated value over time. I was wrong. Listening to that recording in the hallway, I finally understood the truth. To Gregory, I was not a person. I was an appliance. You do not love a toaster. You do not thank a calculator. You use them until they break, and then you replace them. He thought I was broken. He thought I was just a bitter, lonely woman counting pennies in the dark. He had no idea that the calculator was keeping a score he could never pay back. I went back to my desk. I did not pack a box. I did not steal a stapler. I sat down and logged into the server for the last time. Gregory always said I was just a glorified secretary, but he did not realize that I had built the entire nervous system of his business. I had created the automated cash flow macros. I had written the code that flagged overdue invoices. I had built the tax compliance alerts that kept him out of prison for a decade. I did not delete the data. That would be illegal. Instead, I deleted the logic. I removed every template, every shortcut, and every automated formula I had personally created over 10 years. I left him with the raw numbers, thousands of rows of unorganized, chaotic data that he did not know how to read. I essentially removed the engine and left him with a pile of scrap metal. At 4 in the morning, I sent a 2-sentence email. Effective immediately, I resign. Do not contact me. I left my key on the desk, right next to the empty space where my dignity used to be. I walked out into the cool night air, and for the first time in my life, I did not feel heavy. I felt aerodynamic. I disappeared. I blocked their numbers. I moved into a new apartment across town. I did not look back, but I did watch. I watched from a distance as they celebrated their victory. Cameron and Celine had a wedding that looked like a royal coronation. They spent the $75,000 on a venue in Napa Valley, a custom gown, and a honeymoon in the Maldives. They posted every moment on social media, captioning their photos with phrases like self-made and blessed. They thought they had won the lottery. But here is the thing about parasites. They do not understand that the host is the only reason they are alive. Gregory and Celine believed the company made money by magic. They thought revenue just appeared. They did not understand that profit is a discipline, not a natural resource. I watched the slow-motion car crash of my father's legacy over the next 3 years. It was a fascinating lesson in economics. Without me managing the cash flow, the vendors stopped shipping because nobody paid the invoices on time. Without me negotiating the credit lines, the bank raised the interest rates. Celine, the golden niece, was put in charge of operations. She bought an espresso machine for the break room, but forgot to renew the business license. While they burned through their stolen capital, I was reinventing myself. I took a job at a top-tier mergers and acquisitions firm. I stopped trying to be the warm, loving daughter. I leaned into the very traits my father despised. I became cold. I became precise. I became a valuation specialist. My job was to walk into failing companies, strip away the lies, and determine exactly what they were worth down to the penny. I learned the art of corporate warfare. I learned that every business has a skeleton in the closet if you look hard enough. And I knew exactly where Gregory kept his bones. 3 years after I left, I saw the first public sign of the end. A lien notice was filed against the company warehouse. Then, a lawsuit from a supplier. Gregory was drowning. He had burned the bridge, the boat, and the map. He was desperate, and desperation makes people careless. I sat in my glass-walled office, wearing a suit that cost more than Celine's wedding dress, and I smiled. It was time to go shopping. I hired Mr. Sterling not because he was kind, but because he looked like a shark in a $3,000 suit. He was a corporate liquidator, the kind of man who ate distressed assets for breakfast. I sent him to Gregory with a simple offer. An anonymous investment fund was interested in acquiring the company's assets to rebrand and restructure. It was a trap, of course. But Gregory was too desperate to see the teeth. He saw a lifeline. He saw a chance to cash out before the bankruptcy court took his house. He signed the non-disclosure agreement and opened the digital data room. He gave us full access to the books, the bank records, and the transaction history for the last 5 years. He thought he was showing his business to a stranger. He did not know he was handing the murder weapon to the detective. I sat in my apartment with a glass of red wine and opened the files. It was like performing an autopsy on a body that was still warm. The mismanagement was staggering. Celine had put personal vacations on the company credit card. There were leases for equipment they did not use. But I was not looking for incompetence. I was looking for a crime. I knew the date. I knew the amount. I filtered the general ledger for $75,000. There it was. A wire transfer initiated 3 years ago. The recipient was a shell entity called C Marketing Solutions, Cameron. But then I looked at the source of the funds. This is where most people stop looking. But I am a valuation specialist. I trace every dollar back to its origin. My heart hammered against my ribs as I realized what he had done. Gregory did not have $75,000 in profit that month. The operating account had been empty. So, he had transferred the money from a restricted sub-account. He had drained the employee payroll and tax withholding account. I sat back in my chair, stunned by the sheer stupidity of it. He had not just stolen from the company. He had stolen from the government. He had taken the money deducted from his employees' paychecks, money meant for their Social Security and Medicare, and used it to buy a husband for his niece. This was not just embezzlement. This was tax fraud. This was a federal felony. In the eyes of the Internal Revenue Service, this is one of the few crimes where the corporate veil does not protect you. It is called the trust fund recovery penalty. They do not just fine the company. They come for the owner's personal assets. They come for his house, his car, his retirement. And then, they put him in handcuffs. I looked at the screen, and I felt a cold, sharp clarity. I did not need to ruin him. He had already ruined himself. I just needed to be the one holding the evidence when the music stopped. I picked up my phone and called Mr. Sterling. I told him, "Draft the papers. We are not just buying a company. We are executing a foreclosure." The conference room at Sterling & Associates was designed to make people feel small. It was all chrome, glass, and a view of the city skyline that screamed power. I watched the security feed from the adjacent room as my family walked in. They looked like they were attending a gala, not a business closing. Gregory was wearing a new suit. I knew he had put it on a credit card because I had seen the alert on the corporate account before I cut his access. Cameron was sweating through his dress shirt, his eyes darting around the room like a kid in a candy store. And Celine? She was wearing white, as if this were another wedding. Another day where she was the center of attention. They sat down at the mahogany table, confident, smiling. They thought they had pulled off the con of the century. They believed they had tricked a naive institutional investor into buying a dying company for millions. They had no idea they were sitting inside the stomach of the Trojan horse. Mr. Sterling did not offer them coffee. He did not smile. He sat at the head of the table, checking his Rolex. He was charging me $600 an hour, and he was worth every cent for his ability to radiate absolute, terrifying indifference. "We are ready to sign," Gregory said, his voice booming with false bravado. "Your client is making a smart acquisition. The brand value alone is worth double the offer price. We have built a legacy here." I watched Cameron nod eagerly. "The potential for growth is exponential. We just need the liquidity to scale." It was fascinating to watch. They were lying so effortlessly. They were selling a corpse and calling it a sleeping beauty. They did not mention the tax liens. They did not mention the vendors who had blacklisted them. They surely did not mention the $75,000 stolen from the payroll account. Mr. Sterling let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. He opened his leather portfolio. He did not take out a checkbook. He did not take out an acquisition contract. He took out a single, thick document and slid it across the polished wood. "This is not a purchase agreement," Sterling said, his voice flat. Gregory frowned, reaching for his reading glasses. "What is it?" "It is a confession of judgment," Sterling replied, "and a voluntary transfer of personal assets to satisfy a civil debt." The room went deadly quiet. Celine looked confused, glancing between her husband and her uncle. "I don't understand. Where is the money?" "We have a reservation at Le Bernardin tonight to celebrate." "There is no money," Sterling said. "There is only the debt." Gregory stood up, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. "This is a bait and switch. I demand to see the investor. I demand to speak to your boss." I stood up in the next room. I smoothed the lapels of my blazer. I checked my reflection in the glass. I did not look like a plow horse. I did not look like a jinx. I looked like the CEO of a company that specialized in hostile takeovers. Mr. Sterling looked at the door connecting our rooms. "The chairman is here to countersign." He pushed a button on the desk. The magnetic lock disengaged with a heavy thud. The door swung open. I stepped through the doorway. The silence in the room was absolute, heavy enough to choke on. The only sound was the click of my heels on the marble floor. I was wearing a tailored navy suit that screamed authority, the kind of outfit Gregory would have criticized as too masculine 3 years ago. Now, it just looked like money. Gregory's face went slack. He looked at me, then at the empty chair at the head of the table, then back at me. His brain was trying to bridge the gap between the daughter he had discarded and the predator standing in front of him. "Vanessa?" he whispered. The name sounded foreign in his mouth. Then, the mask slipped back on. The pivot was instantaneous. He stood up, opening his arms wide, a smile plastering itself onto his face. "Vanessa? Thank God. You? You are the investor? I should have known." He laughed, a nervous, braying sound. "I told Cameron," I said. "Someone smart is behind this. Who better than my own daughter to save the family legacy?" He started walking toward me, reaching out to hug me. He thought he could do what he always did, rewrite history in real time. He thought he could hug me and erase 3 years of silence, erasing the theft, erasing the insults. He thought blood was a get-out-of-jail-free card. I did not move. I simply held up a hand. "Sit down, Gregory." He froze. I did not call him Dad. I did not smile. "I am not here to save the legacy," I said, my voice calm and level. "I am here to audit it." "Audit?" Cameron squeaked. He was shrinking in his chair, looking everywhere but at me. "Mr. Sterling," I said, "please play Exhibit A." Sterling tapped his tablet. The boardroom speakers, high-quality surround sound meant for global conference calls, crackled to life. My father's voice filled the room, booming and distorted but undeniable. "Take the $75,000. Dump the plow horse. Marry the show pony." Celine froze. She had known about the money, but not the words. Not that she had been priced, traded, reduced to livestock. Gregory went pale. "You left the door open," I said. I stood at the head of the table. "You called me a plow horse. You were right. Plow horses work. They endure. But if you beat them long enough, they learn to kick." The projector dropped. A transaction log appeared. Exhibit B. $75,000. Wired to C Marketing Solutions. From the Federal Payroll Tax Trust Fund. I circled the account. "You stole from your employees. And from the United States government." Cameron started sweating. He knew what payroll fraud meant. "It was a loan," Gregory stammered. "Intent doesn't matter to the IRS," I said. "Only the transaction." I placed the civil complaint on the table. "If this is filed, it becomes public. Vendors, neighbors, the district attorney." Gregory tore it up. "You won't send your own father to prison." "Mr. Sterling," I said calmly. "Do we have backups?" "Cloud and Partners," Sterling replied. I checked my phone. "Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. IRS criminal investigation. Unless the debt is settled." I slid the confession of judgment forward. Your house and the lake cabin. Principal, interest, penalties, Gregory whispered. Where will I live? That's your problem. You have 60 seconds. He signed. Sterling stamped the document. Title transfer recorded by 5:15. 30 days to vacate. I looked at them, father, cousin, fiancé. Bad investments. You were right, I said. I am a cash register. And I just closed your account. 30 days later, I filed an amended tax return. The $75,000 was reclassified. Theft loss for the company. Unreported income for Cameron. The audit followed. Gregory lost the house, then his freedom. Cameron and Celine divorced before bankruptcy court. Now I stand on the balcony of the lake cabin. The numbers balance. They called me a plow horse. They were wrong. I am the auditor, and the books are closed.